Welcome to Catholic Education Matters, the podcast that celebrates the beauty of Catholic education, highlighting excellence in academics, athletics, and the transformative power of faith. Join us as we share the stories of those making a lasting impact on Catholic education. Let's begin. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Catholic Education Matters. My name is Troy Van Vliet, and I am really excited today to have with me as our guests Andy Szocs and Dr. Andrew Abela. And I'll start out by saying a few words about Andy. Andy, one of my favorite people, an absolutely amazing person, not only an incredible, successful businessman, but someone who's setting a huge example as a philanthropist as well. And he's a supporter of Catholic education. And Andy, welcome, and thank you for joining us here today.
Absolutely delighted to be here.
All right. And now, Andy, you introduced us to Dr. Andrew Abela. And so excited to have you've spoke about him for many times on many different occasions, and we're promoting him to us also through the Napa Institute as a speaker there, and you've known him for several years now. And Dr. Abela, I want to welcome you here today. Before I read your bio, because it's extensive, and I want everybody to know your background and what you do. And rather than me trying to fumble through it, I thought I'm just going to read it out. But thank you for joining us here today. First of all, Dr. Abela is a distinguished academic and a thought leader in the field of business ethics and Catholic education, which is very fitting for our show, of course, dear. He currently serves as professor and dean of the School of Business at the Catholic University of America, where he's dedicated to fostering a curriculum that integrates ethical principles and practical business applications. Dr. Abela holds a PhD in business from the University of Notre Dame, where he focused on the intersection of faith and business practices. His research interests include the role of ethics in corporate governance, the impact of moral philosophy on business decision-making, and the importance of integrating Catholic social teaching into business education. In addition to his academic pursuits, Dr. Abela is a sought-after speaker and consultant, frequently engaging with organizations and institutions to promote ethical leadership and responsible business practices. He has published numerous articles and papers in reputable journals, including a new book, contributing to the discourse on how business can operate with integrity while achieving success. A passionate advocate for the importance of Catholic education, Dr. Abela believes in the transformative power of education to shape not only skilled professionals, but also principled leaders who can navigate the complexities of the modern business landscape. He is committed to mentoring students and fostering an environment where they can grow in both their professional skills and their moral character. Outside of his professional life, Dr. Abela is actively involved in his local community and church, where he seeks to live out his faith through service and engagement. He is dedicated to helping others understand the value of ethical decision-making and the role it plays in creating a just and compassionate society. Dr. Abela's work continues to inspire students, educators, and business leaders alike, as he champions the integration of faith and ethics in the world of business. Welcome, Dr. Abela.
Thank you. Good to be here. I have to correct one small thing, though.
Okay.
My doctorate is from the University of Virginia, not Notre Dame.
Okay.
Just to clarify that I'm not flying on the false colors here.
We may have put that in there just for dramatic purposes.
That's good. That's good.
But I'm glad you caught that. We wanted to make sure you were paying attention as we were going through this.
I was paying attention,
and you nailed it. So that was a long introduction. Actually, it's one other thing I want to mention just about Andy before we get into this. Andy, you also have championed the new build of the Our Lady of the Mountain Parish in Whistler, British Columbia, as well And I wanted to say congratulations on that. And I also wanted to say thank you for your support in championing that and putting that together. It's been needed up there for a long time. And we're going to be so proud when we're up at Whistler to be attending Mass at the new church there. So congratulations and thank you.
And we're hoping that's going to be in October this year. So we're closing in on it, and everything looks extremely promising. And it's just a ton of miracles with the Holy Spirit and a lot of effort.
That's great. That is awesome. That's awesome. Have you, Dr. Abela, have you visited Andy up at Whistler ever?
I haven't. I've been to Whistler a couple of times, but I've never. Andy and I usually meet in Northern California, I think, right? Andy is,
okay.
yeah,
And Maui.
and Maui. That's right. That's right. I lived for 12 years in Canada, and my
did
parents
you?
still live up in Toronto. So I visited Vancouver many times, worked there for a while, but that was all before I met Andy. So
right.
yeah, Maui is a warmer place to meet. So
Perfect. I don't blame you. And originally you're from Malta, is that correct?
I am.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, good. So one of the things we wanted to talk about right out of the gate is your book titled Super Habits. And we were discussing that before we started the podcast. What a great, I haven't read it, admittedly. It's on my list now, of course, now that I've reviewed it as well and had a look at it chapter by chapter. Can you tell us a little bit about what's inspired you and how this book came about, Dr. Abela?
I noticed that there were kind of indications of a renewed interest in the idea of virtue, but in a number of areas, in psychology, in management, but nobody was using the word virtue. But they were sort of approaching the idea of a virtue as a habit of excellence. And ancient civilizations through until about 300 years ago, every major civilization was grounded in this understanding that to be a successful human being, a flourishing human being, one had to have a collection of these habits of excellence, like courage or self-discipline or wisdom. But that somehow got lost along the way some centuries ago. But I noticed that different organizations, different writers were starting to rediscover this notion of this core set of habits. But the word virtue itself, unfortunately for many people, sort of lost its meaning. When you ask most people, well, what is a virtue? They don't think in terms of a habit of excellence. They think in terms of somebody being maybe preachy, or kind of virtue signaling, so it has this sort of negative connotation. At the same time, I also noticed a lot of interest in the idea of habits. Some very well kind of highly successful books about habits, like Atomic Habits, for example. And the point I wanted to make, so without using the word virtue, is explain that virtues are a very special kind of habit, a super habit, hence the name of the book. So that's kind of the background to the book.
Wow, that's amazing. So that's kind of where the idea came from. You were just observing and you were just seeing how maybe different professors, philosophers were sort of dancing around the
yeah. Well, I can give you some examples. So in positive psychology for the last 30 years, they have been studying things they call character strengths, like self-discipline and courage and generosity and gratitude. And then more recently, in the last few years, I used to work for many years for the consulting firm of McKinsey and Company. They have a very reputable journal called the McKinsey Quarterly. So the McKinsey Quarterly published an article, and the case the article made was that it's not enough for employees and companies to have skills. They also have to have these underlying, what they call distinct elements of talent, like courage and self-discipline and gratitude and generosity. And it's sort of clear that makes sense. And then Deloitte, another consulting firm, had a similar article where they said there's important to have these competencies at the root of all kind of employee success, like courage and self-discipline and generosity and gratitude. And then there was another organization that was talking about preparing students for success in the world. And they said, the key to success is developing what they call durable skills, like courage and self-discipline. And so you see the pattern here, like
Yeah.
all different names. So durable skills, capabilities, distinct elements of talent, character strengths. They're all talking about the same thing, but each coming from a different direction. They're all talking about the virtues as habits of excellence. So what I wanted to do is pull all of that research together and say, you guys, you're all using different names, different words, but you're talking about this. So let's put it all together and show how the kind of ancient wisdom and the modern science and research all come together around this concept of virtue. So
Right. Well, there's so many either new authors or people that just kind of want to gain popularity by relabeling something and making it their own. And so when
That's
all
true.
this time it's been called virtues, and it's been called virtues within the church for a long time. It's another thing, another good, social justice is another thing. It's kind of been hijacked by maybe some crowds that we aren't so proud of. But it's really a Catholic term that was introduced long ago. And
yeah, because it's a type of justice, right? Which
yes.
is one of the virtues. Well, certainly one of the cardinal virtues is justice. Yeah.
Yes. So so many terms either get hijacked or relabeled, and so the virtues have been subject to that as well. So, and I'm glad you're bringing it together. I'm glad it's a Catholic. You're bringing the Catholic aspect back to that this is not a new thing. That's so exciting to hear. So,
yeah, I will say that the book itself isn't explicitly Catholic, even though it's grounded in the work of St. Thomas Aquinas.
right.
I wanted to write it so that it would be accessible to anybody. And people wouldn't just kind of exclude it and say, well, that's Catholic, I'm not interested. I just want anybody to be exposed to this. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So it is grounded in it. And and it's entitled Super Habits, which is really captivating. That's your spin is the title of the book, I suppose.
Yeah, so I'm sort of guilty of what you were saying in terms of putting new names. But in my case, the purpose of the name was to bring back the original meaning of virtue, which is a very special kind of habit, right? So,
right. Now, and Andy, you've read the book, correct?
I haven't read it. I've skimmed it. I'm on probably page 60. So
page 60. There you
that's
go.
Pretty good.
You're
that's
honest.
Pretty good.
You're honest. Yes. So that's great. And what do you think so far? You've been promoting it to me, of course.
Well, I think it's so appropriate for today's world that virtue enter in Dr. Abela's vision that to be able to measure it and then use it as a tool for general education is incredible. And I'm anxious to hear how Troy, you with your super efforts with JP2 high school, it's a $80 million high school, or Dr. Abela, and it's a one-man show almost by Troy, and raising the funds and trying to be independent from all the Catholic support, etc., but working with them and having them endorse it. And so how you may be, this is high school, and how your comments, how would they use this, for students at the high school level? Because this is an incredible expansion for a population that is badly needed, and it's private and it's under control and all sorts of good things.
That was a great question, Andy. Why is it? You think about why do we send our kids to school, particularly when you think about high school and college? We want them to learn to read, to write, to do math, and so on. But there are many things that they that we teach them that they will probably never use again, like organic chemistry or calculus, you know. So what's really going on in our educational enterprise, particularly as kids get older? What is, I would argue, more important than the content of what they're learning is the formation of their character, right? So, but what is character? Character is nothing other than the collection of virtues that a person has, or the mix of virtues and vices, the good and bad habits, right? That are at the core of what it means to be human. And so this is, in a sense, a big reason of why we send kids to school. But many schools don't formally pay attention to this. If asked, they would say, yes, we want our students to graduate and be good leaders and be courageous and be organized and be disciplined and be diligent and be honest and so on. So they would go through what are actually a list of virtues, but many schools don't make a deliberate effort to do this. So we have a curriculum for calculus, but we don't have a curriculum for honesty or for self-discipline or for courage, you know? And so what in a sense, what I'm trying to do with my book is encourage a more deliberate focus on the specific virtues as we think about how we form of our students. And that's what we've been experimenting and, if you will, prototyping at the Bush School of Business, which I run, and where Andy is a board member, which is how we got to know each other. So that's what I think the benefit of the idea of the virtues, being more explicit about the idea of the virtues, can be helpful for education, particularly K-12 education, particularly at the high school level. So
I think our school, we've had that at St. John Paul II, we've had that vision to want to be that, exactly what you're talking about, where we're working on the whole person. And but your book is a perfect example of what should be formalized in curriculum. I couldn't agree more. When I look at that, these are the habits that some of the kids will get and figure out on their own. Some of them will learn, maybe a parent will teach them or something like that, or they may know somebody that has influence over them that may teach them some of these virtues. Or it might be mentioned in a class or two, but we want to get our school focused in on these things to develop great servant leaders that go out in the world that can be recognized as that, and that have that moral compass that they can move forward with. And this is it's so important to us. I couldn't agree. Can I ask you how in the university that you're teaching in, or that you're the dean of there, what ways are you incorporating it into there, or are you yet, or have you been?
We are actually. We've been experimenting with doing that for the last several years. And then last summer, we actually received a $1 million grant to take the experiments we'd been trying within the business school and spread them across the whole of Catholic University, which is the university that we belong to. So we've been working on that this past year, and we'll start to implement that this fall. And so there are three things that classically the kind of ancients would say are necessary if you want to form somebody in virtue. First, they have to know about the virtues. They have to know what they are, what they mean. And so you study that, you read about that, and so on. Second, they have to see examples of them in action. Because the virtues, these habits, aren't kind of subject to formulas, So what the honest thing to do in a particular situation looks like could vary at different times and places. But not to say that for a second that is relativistic, but that human life is complicated. And so if you want to learn what a virtue is, the way to learn it is to observe virtuous people. And so the way we handle those two parts is, one is, of course, in our philosophy and theology classes and other classes, people will read about the virtues. And then we try to, and I'm sure you do the same thing. And then another thing that I'm sure you do that we do is we make sure that we hire faculty who themselves are virtuous, so that they would be examples of the virtues, right? So that's the second thing. critically important. But then the third and the most important thing is that the students practice the virtues. And this is where we usually fall down. As you say, we leave it to them to figure it out by themselves. We don't do that with calculus. We don't say, oh, maybe you'll stumble into calculus. We're very deliberate about it. So why do we expect them to stumble into courage or into diligence,
Right.
And so it's almost like saying, I'm going to teach you how to swim. We tell you all about swimming and give you the theory of swimming and describe the different styles of swimming. And we're going to show you videos of swimming. And we're going to tell you stories about people who are good swimmers, but you are never, ever going to get anywhere close to the water. How effective would that be, right?
Yeah.
It would be useless. And yet we do the same thing oftentimes with virtue. We talk about courage and we talk about diligence, but we don't give them opportunities to kind of do deliberate practice. So that's what we've been trying to do. So I'll give you some examples. So in a finance class where students have kind of mock investments, they have kind of shadow portfolios that they invest, and then they see how they do over the semester. The professor there is very deliberate about giving them opportunities to practice the virtue of temperance or self-discipline. Because Andy will notice the surest way to lose money on the stock market is to lose self-control. Right, and start to chase the market downwards, for example. And so if you can exercise the self-discipline of saying, okay, I've made my analysis, I've invested, I'm now going to ride through whatever the gyrations of the market until I reach my goal or whatever, you're exercising the virtue of self-discipline or temperance. Another one would be when students are working together on a team project, for example, we will give them deliberate opportunity to exercise the virtue of friendliness or friendship. So we will talk about that and we'll say, okay, as you do this, I want you to be deliberate in how you exercise that virtue. And in many cases, they are exercising different virtues because students do, by hook or by crook, cultivate many of the virtues. But in some cases, they don't even know that that's what they're doing.
Right.
And so by labeling it and by saying this is the virtue, this is how, then it allows them to be more deliberate in their practice. So they're not just stumbling into it, they're actually getting there through deliberate practice.
Right. Exactly. I know courage is something that I talk to my daughters about quite often. They're saying, "Well, I'm scared, or I don't know if I can do it." And I'm just like, "Well, that's what courage is. Is to have fear, but to go ahead with it anyway."
Exactly.
And that's how you overcome. And when it's pointed out, and the more times it gets pointed out that this is what courage is, and so that they can recognize it in the future, in a time where they have fear, and they can go, okay, this is when I need to bring my courage into this situation, and I'm going to move forward with it. And just like last time, and it turned out great when I had courage. So, but if that's not pointed out, and I am by no means, I am no master in this, but I do know in certain areas where I formalize it and point it out, they can, they'll remember it more, and they'll be able to pull it out on their own down the road and utilize that.
Yeah, even better than remember it, it will become a habit for them.
There you go.
So through regular
Super
practice
habit.
of, okay, I'm afraid, but I'm going to move ahead anyway.
Right.
Then the next time I'm afraid, I'm just going to practice moving ahead anyway. And it's actually going to get easier. And what the psychologists tell us is that the feeling of fear starts to go away. So, for example, one of the things you can do is you try to reframe the fear as a challenge. Oh, I'm afraid to get up in front of the class and give a speech. Oh, let me think of that as a challenge. I'm going to challenge myself to get up in front of the class and give a speech. And I'm going to get those butterflies and fears or whatever, but I'm going to just do it anyway. And then the next time it'll be easier, and the time after that it'll be easier. It's a very encouraging message to young people that these things aren't things that you're born with. That if you think your friend is so much more courageous than you are, doesn't mean you're condemned to that for the rest of your life. You just practice, and then you'll become as courageous as they are.
Dr. Abela, maybe you could move on to, everything is fantastic. How do you how do you measure it? Okay. Maybe comment as to what progress are you making in that area? Because it's nice to be able to converse this, talk about it, etc. But at the end of the game, measurement is absolutely critical to have some means of am I gaining or not by your own judgment, by some vehicle that gives us that.
So I'm not surprised to get that question from you, Andy, given that I know how measurement was key to all of your success. So yes, absolutely. So the psychologists have done us a favor here, where they have studied different ways of measuring virtue. It's always like we can't yet put electrodes in people's brains and measure their virtue. I'm not sure we ever will be able to, but typically the methods are through surveys, and you think well, if you're asking somebody if they're virtuous, how reliable is that going to be? It turns out it's pretty reliable, because you don't ask them directly, how courageous are you? You ask them about situations. For example, you ask them about preferences and beliefs and so on. And from that, you can elicit kind of how courageous somebody is or how honest. This has been validated. So, for example, they will survey employees and then survey their supervisors. And the results supervisors about the employees. So it's not just the employee responding about themselves, but the supervisor as well. And the results tend to be pretty closely aligned. In other words, indicating that the employees' read of themselves is pretty accurate. And it, especially, I mean, you have to make sure these are confidential, but you even get people, when you ask them, like, do you lie a lot? They'll say, yeah, I lie a lot. So even liars will tell you the truth about the fact that they lie. So the survey methods are pretty accurate. So we have an app that we developed called the Grow Virtue app. And it starts out with a personal diagnostic where you answer a bunch of questions, and then it gives you back an assessment on a scale of 1 to 7 for each of 40-some virtues. And then from that, you can choose, okay, where do I want to work? And then you can reassess maybe a month later, 2 months later, after you've been practicing, and see if you're improving. Because one of the cool things about virtue is, as you grow in one virtue, it helps lift up the others as well. So you don't want to retest just on the one you've been practicing on. You want to retest on everything and see kind of how it's all growing together.
Wow. So the self-assessment you find to be effective.
Remarkably so. Remarkably
Yeah.
so. So we're experimenting with this as well in businesses, where we'll look at the aggregate kind of result across a whole bunch of employees, and see kind of in general, kind of where are they generally weakest in a certain virtue, where are they strong, and so on. And then you can implement kind of development programs to help the whole organization grow on a particular virtue. So, for example, if you wanted more innovation in a company, interestingly, what drives that is you need two things. You need more people to be more courageous, right? Because they have to be willing to take risks in order to see innovation. But you also need the virtue of forgiveness among managers. If managers aren't forgiving, you won't get much innovation. That's an innovation killer. If employees think, well, why would I take a risk? I'm just going to get, in trouble. But if they see that people are forgiving, like, you have made an effort, it was an honest effort, it didn't work out, that's fine, let's move on, let's try something else, then that tends to, so there's research on this that tends to facilitate more innovation.
This is good, and it's very promising. The next question I have is, how far along are you into that? I mean, are you 1 year into it? Do you have, early stages, medium stages?
In terms of the measurement research itself is actually several decades old now, so that's pretty good. The actual experiments we're doing in companies, less than a year. That's how I just started that a few months ago. So still very, very new. Yeah.
Wow. And tell us a little bit more. The Grow Virtue app, is that an available app that? Okay.
It's available both for the iPhone and for Android.
Yeah.
The word Grow Virtue, like, as one word. And there's a free version and a premium version, like most of these apps, but the free version, you can do the full diagnostic and it will tell you your top 5 and bottom 5 virtues. And then the paid version gives you all, there's 40 some of them, gives you all of them and gives you the actual rating from 1 to 7 on each one. But then it does this other cool thing. We use AI so you choose say you pick a virtue to say I want to grow in, we were talking about courage, say resilience, which is a type of courage, mental courage, I want to grow in resilience. Then the AI will recommend a daily practice that you can do. And you can negotiate with it because it's AI, and you can say, well, that seems too difficult for me, and it'll give you something easier. And then it will give you daily reminders. Don't forget to practice resilience today in this such and such a way. For example, I used it myself, the virtue of orderliness, which is kind of the habit of doing things in the right order and structure. I'm a reasonably organized, actually quite well organized person. But I had a bad habit in my morning routine where I'd get out of bed, turn off the alarm, check my phone to see if there was any crisis from the last night that I had to deal with or whatever. Most crises can wait an hour. And so I wanted to develop a habit of get up, exercise, pray, shower, and then I'll look at my phone. And so I had the app reminding me every morning. So if I pick up the phone, there's the app saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, And so it's worked. After about maybe 5 weeks, I now get up and I hardly even tempted to do it. So I just I have built the habits now of orderliness in my morning routine. So
that is great. I need to develop that same habit. I'll tell you, well, confession, my same issue. I pick up my phone and so I'll do my best to say prayers first. My problem is that if I'm saying the rosary, all of my my rosary notes are on my phone. So
yeah.
I pick up my phone to open that up, and it's like, oh, I got some messages through the night, and then then 15 minutes has gone by, and like, dang it. So, and then the Bible in the Ear podcast with Father Mike, same thing. It's on my phone. So usually I'm listening to that while I'm working out. I don't. So that one I can kind of, but picking up that phone, what a distraction. So I think I need to have all the mysteries written down on a card, so I'm not actually picking up my phone. So
I think that makes sense. Yeah,
I'll have to do that. It's great to have everything in your phone. It's like, oh, I've got all this information in one place, but it is the biggest distraction. And so many I worry about our kids in terms of our phones with distractions, and you gave a perfect example of it with first thing in the morning. We'll see what happened through the night, and then you're distracted already right out of the gate. So now I'm kind of going down that kind of rabbit hole, but I wanted to say I empathize with your with the but I'm glad to hear that you've broken through that. So I'll definitely need to work on that.
I want to echo the same thing. I'm like Troy. I worry about what happened last night, and we immediately want to know, etc. How am I going to challenge the new ones? I got to, do basically shower, exercise, prayer is very important. Puts me down, normalizes me, and then get into my daily routine. I have another question, Dr. Abela. Is a little bit of mission of JP2, as near as I can understand, is this high school is an incredible attraction in today's world. The distractions of gender, what's right, what's wrong. The whole thing is so messed up that people are really looking for a safe place to educate their kids. And Troy and his efforts, they have an unbelievable product that they're offering to the parishioners and non-Catholics, etc. Do you have any recommendation how he may take what you're doing and being able to say, we're different because of the work from virtues, super habits, etc., and kind of put that in the packages to deliver so people easily understand, man, that's what I'm looking for.
You could speak about we do deliberate character formation and then mention some of the virtues, right? And say you want your children not only to know about calculus and organic chemistry and the founding and so on, but you want them to be courageous, self-disciplined, fair-minded, friendly, generous, loving, etc. people. A lot of people say that that's what they're doing, but the difference here is that you are being deliberate about forming them in that it's a conscious effort, not just that we hope they end up that way.
And that's a beautiful answer for a start. The next thing is, how do you kind of layer in, because we're doing it because we know what Dr. Abela or Super Habits is, a little bit of evidence in the same phrase.
Good. So then the evidence would be we take the ancient wisdom from the ancient Greek and Roman philosophers, the wisdom from the Bible, Old Testament and New, the wisdom from the medieval theologians like Thomas Aquinas, and then we integrate the best of the modern psychological science studying these things. And wouldn't you know, they end up saying the same things when we're talking about the virtues. It's really fascinating for me to read scientific studies about, say, diligence, for example, and what St. Thomas Aquinas said on the subject. So diligence is the habit of learning well, right? But most people think of it as something that is driven by willpower. So when we want students to be more diligent, it's like bear down, white knuckle your way through and study your homework. Do your homework, study your textbook, whatever. But both the contemporary science and Aquinas, and of course Aquinas said it first 750 years ago, says that if you want somebody to grow in diligence, the key is to get them to love the subject. That diligence is driven more by a desire to know than by willpower. And willpower is finite. It's easy to get worn out, but love is infinite. And so if you can help students learn to love the subject by understanding kind of how it will benefit them, by understanding how it could benefit other people, for example, that's how they grow in the virtue of diligence. So getting kind of give you a specific example there, but it's the evidence for this is the wisdom of the ancients combined with the best of modern science, and they say the same thing, which is help people practice the virtues to grow in the virtues, and that's what builds their character.
Let me say this: you're very insightful, and what you just said explains it beautifully to me. I mean, I'm further along on that question than I was 10 minutes ago. Now what we have to do is how do we kind of encapsulate just what he said and then Troy, to bring communication to your customer. And I'm what you just said. That's a great start. Okay, more than I would have been able to put Dr. Abela. He simplifies things and he sees through them and helps you get to that convincing message, which is so important to the person that's going to make the decision. This is where I want to send my kid. That makes sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and you're asking good questions, Andy, because it's actually difficult to boil down, because what you're presenting is, in a sense, a whole different worldview. People may think of here. Let me kind of take another crack at it. People may think of things like honesty and courage and self-discipline as kind of optional choices. You could do this, or you could just take a different strategy if you wanted. Some people might think, well, you could just kind of be shifty and cheat a little bit, but if you're smart, you can get away with it, the
way I look at it is what we just talked about. The value of that is we would be kind of unique in that message. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, 100%. We're doing something that isn't being done by other people. And so,
and
and that's a plus. And then we continue to work on what all those things you talked about. I think it's super.
and the thing, yeah, and the thing I think in part that you're doing differently is to recognize that the things like honesty and self-discipline and courage and so on are already part of what it means to be a human being. So I use the analogy of the kind of like spiritual or mental muscles that are already there. And so when you start to grow in them, you just become more and better as a human being. They're not sort of just random skills that you might or might not, like learning to ride a bicycle. You can know how to ride a bike, or you can not know how to ride a bike. It doesn't really matter. Like if you know how to ride a bike, it means you can ride a bike. Fine. But it doesn't make you a better human being because you know how to ride a bicycle. But if you become more courageous or more honest or more self-disciplined, you actually become a better human being. You become more of what you are designed to be. I was talking to a professor, a teacher at another great high school here near Washington, D.C. called the Heights. Maybe you've heard of the Heights. It's a boys' school, Potomac, Maryland. And he was talking, so this teacher, he also doubles up as the climbing coach. And he said every year he takes a new crop of boys out climbing for the first time. The next morning they come to him and go, "Sir, muscles I didn't even know I had are killing me." You know, maybe you've had that experience with a new workout, a new sport, or whatever. And I like that analogy because the virtues for many people are muscles they didn't even know they had. So when somebody's trying to become more courageous, they're not learning something foreign to them. Everybody has a courage muscle inside them. So some people, that muscle is a little bit, emaciated, but it's there. And it just has to be exercised in order to become strong. So the virtues, and the reason I go through in the book, name each one of them and kind of list them all, is because they are all inside us, and it's just a matter of activating them, practicing them to bring them to life. So.
One of the things, well, deliberate character formation, that's a beautiful, that's something that we have to get, I think, right up on our website as part of our mission and vision and statement of values, that this is something that we do at our school that separates us, is it's deliberate. It's not just something that happens sort of, on the side or through attrition in some of these. No, we're deliberately pointing it out. One of the things that we talked about in our school, it's just being finished. Will be open September, the new campus, that is.
Great.
And we're going to have throughout the school, we've got above the lockers areas where we can put, quotes, either a biblical quote or inspirational quotes, things like that. But virtuous quotes or different virtues that you had said you've got 40 of them on the app. And so we've got places all over the school that we can actually display different virtues as a reminder to kids, teachers, everybody in the school that, hey, these are some of the things that we need to continue to work on and that we stand for as well.
That's a really good idea. What I would suggest is that you don't just put the names of the virtues, but put the definitions.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
To put the word courage up doesn't mean anything. Well, it does mean something, but nobody understands the meaning. But to have a description of what the courage is and forgiveness and all of these, compassion, those types of things. Our school, we teach our kids compassion. On Remembrance Day, we'll take the kids down and we'll go to the Gardens of Gethsemane at the cemetery there, and they'll clean off some of the gravestones that have been neglected. That's teaching them, some compassion, and it's teaching them the remembrance of those that died that went before us. Having the kids participate in the soup kitchen, is another way of teaching compassion. And if it's formal, and it is formalized a lot in our school, but it's done just because we've got some great teachers. I think it is, if it's more formalized, by taking things from taking the lead from your book, Super Habits, that might be something that we can Expand on even more. Like
One, yeah. So one way to formalize is this, which is there's a copy of this in the back of every copy of the book. It's a fold-out poster, and what it does is it shows all of the. There's actually there are 50. We don't have them all in the app, but the book has all 50 of the virtues, and it shows how they all fit together. And that, I think, is also distinctive, because here's why this is important. And it wouldn't, Andy, it wouldn't rise to the level of kind of part of the kind of selling pitch, if you will, but it is kind of under the hood, I think, really important. When I started to do this work, I wanted a kind of a complete taxonomy of the virtues. It's like, what are they? How many of there are, that sort of thing. And I started reading different books about virtues with people from the same religious tradition. So say books written by Catholics, about the virtues, and every book had a different list of virtues in it. Now, there was a lot of overlap, but none of them were the same, and it made me think, if I go back to chemistry, imagine a bunch of chemistry textbooks where each one had a different periodic table, This one had sodium, but this one didn't. This one had iron, but this one didn't. It's like, how can we do chemistry? We can't even agree what the elements are. How can we do virtue if we can't even agree what the virtues are?
Wow.
It's not every positive abstract noun is a virtue. Tolerance, it's not a virtue. It's a nice thing, but it's not actually a virtue in the classical sense of the word. There isn't a tolerance muscle inside us, and that's important, because there's no, with a virtue, you can't have too much of it. So there's no such thing as too much courage, but you could have too much tolerance, because then you're tolerating things that shouldn't be tolerated. So the only place I found a complete and sort of coherent taxonomy of the virtues was in St. Thomas Aquinas. So that diagram is my attempt to visualize the whole system of St. Thomas Aquinas. And maybe I say a little bit more about that now, because I think this is really important. And you can explain it to kids this way. You can say, okay, so the virtues are the habits of excellence, right? And you want to have them all. Or you can work on one at a time, but you want to have them all. So which are they? Aquinas goes this way. And this is kind of, if you're looking at the diagram, you're working from the inside outwards. Each of the rings moving outwards on the diagram is kind of making these distinctions. So Aquinas says that you start out by making a distinction between our supernatural and our natural lives, right? So faith, hope, and charity are the virtues of our supernatural life, right? Our spiritual lives. Now, we're not saying divide these up. We're just making distinctions for the purpose of understanding. So we've got those virtues. Then for our natural lives, there's a group of virtues for the intellectual life, and then there's virtues for the practical life, everyday lives. And this is where it gets really interesting. Aquinas says, okay, so you think about our everyday lives, what do we do all day? We think, we act or interact with others particularly, and we experience our feelings. That's pretty much it, right? Is there anything other than that happens all day long with every human being? It's thoughts, actions, feelings. That's it, right? And then he makes one other step. He says, okay, our feelings, we can divide into two groups. We have many different kinds of feelings, but generally there are feelings that draw us towards things, which would be our desires, and feelings that push us away from things, which would be our fears. So thoughts, actions, fears, desires, that's it. That's what happens in every human being every day. The classical idea of the cardinal virtues, prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, these are the four most important virtues in our everyday lives. Why? Prudence is the habit of making wise decisions, sometimes called practical wisdom. Right? And so that addresses all of our thoughts, because when we're thinking, it's usually for the purpose of making a decision. Justice is the habit of treating others fairly and with respect for their dignity. That is the virtue for managing all of our actions, because all of our actions are usually involving other people, so we're supposed to always act justly. Fortitude or courage, as you said before, is the habit of not letting fear get in the way of what you're supposed to do, moving ahead despite being afraid. So that handles our fears. And then temperance, also called self-discipline, is the habit of only following your desires when it makes sense to do so. So the idea is if you have those four cardinal virtues, prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, all of your thoughts, actions, and feelings are managed by good habits all day long. So isn't that cool? So there it is. Those four are the core ones. And then Aquinas goes one extra step where he takes each of those four and breaks them apart. So for example, prudence or practical wisdom has 8 virtues kind of underlying it, if you will. There's sort of parts, and there are virtues. And so Andy, this you'll know this from your life in business. Decision making, right? So prudence is the habit, or practical wisdom, the habit of making wise decisions. Decision making needs 3 things. You need to gather the data, you need to analyze it, and then you need to take action, right, or implement it. So that this is Aquinas 750 years ago. He's saying exactly the same thing. So there are 4 virtues for gathering information. There's memory. He says our memory is in a sense a virtue, the habit of remembering things, right? So you can remember what's important. Then there's judgment, which is to bring to bear the correct principles. Then there's teachability, which we sometimes call docility, which is the ability to learn from others. And then there's creativity, which is the ability to come up with the habit of coming up with new ideas and new information and so on. So those are the 4 virtues for gathering information. Then there's one virtue for processing it all, is called reasonableness, which it calls called reasoning, which is basically the habit of logical thinking, right? And then the third group are 3 virtues for making sure that the idea or decision you come up with is actually implementable. And they are called foresight, which is the habit of setting goals and following goals. Because if your decisions aren't aligned to your goals, they're not going to be good decisions, right? Then there's alertness, which is the habit of being constantly kind of having situational awareness to make sure you know what's going on around you. Otherwise, your decisions will be out of touch with reality. And then there's what's called preparedness, which is the habit of anticipating problems, anticipating obstacles, and preparing for those in advance so that when your decision is made and acted upon, it doesn't kind of run into a wall. So I kind of went very fast through a lot of material there, but just to kind of sum up, we have our thoughts, actions, and feelings of fear and desire. Those line up with the 4 cardinal virtues. And then each of those cardinal virtues has its own underlying virtues. And so I gave you the example of prudence, which has 8. And so if somebody's trying to become a better decision maker, for example, it's hard to develop the virtue of practical wisdom because it's such a big virtue, but maybe they focus on goal setting for a while. If you start to develop the virtue of foresight and become better at goal setting, then your decisions are going to be better because the goals are going to guide your decision making. So there's this whole framework that could be introduced to students, I think, in early high school, maybe even middle school, so that they see the whole range, so that they don't, when they see those slogans on the wall or the definition of virtue, it doesn't just sound like this sort of never-ending, oh, I got to do better. It's like, no, here's a picture of who you want to become, and these are the pieces, and you're just going to keep working on these different pieces. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, although I feel like I was drinking through a fire hose there. But
sorry, I get a little carried away.
That's fantastic. That amount of information in incorporating the super habits into our school curriculum in some form or another, whether it's formally or informally. I like it to be more formal. But the vision of St. John Paul II Academy is fairly simple. It's forming students in Christ so that they grow in wisdom, stature, and favor with God and fellow man. So that's our vision. That's our grandiose vision. The mission of St. John Paul II Academy is inspired by the words of St. John Paul II, be not afraid. St. John Paul II Academy seeks to prepare students to be joyful witnesses to the gospel, firmly grounded in the teachings of Jesus Christ and the mission of the Catholic Church. We encourage students to embrace their faith with courage, defend the dignity of every human life, and live as missionary disciples who seek to build a civilization of love. Through a Christ-centered education, we empower students to integrate faith and reason, foster a spirit of service, and live as active participants in the church's mission to renew the world. So it's a pretty big mission that we've got there, but it's kind of, and then we've got a statement of values. There's 9 of them. I won't read them all out. Well, I can read the title of them anyways. Number 1, one truth in Jesus Christ. Number 2, the universal call to holiness, individuality, and faith and love of God. 3 is dignity of the human person, respect for self and others. 4 is faith and reason in harmony, conviction and confidence. 5, evangelization and missionary spirit, motivation. Servant leadership is number 6, service and self-sacrifice. Number 7 is hope and courage, perseverance and resilience, integrity. 8 is building a civilization of love with joy and empathy, connectedness and community. And number 9 is the formation of the whole person, mind, body, and soul. So it's pretty robust. And I think the super habits and all of these virtues just will help support all of this, of course, and help make this possible, our vision and mission. So,
well, it particularly fits with your overall vision about because if we want to imitate Christ, if we want to be like Him, the Catholic theology teaches that all of the virtues are participations in Christ's virtue. So when I'm being courageous as a Christian, I'm participating in Christ's courage. So maybe some of your students have those wristbands that say, "What would Jesus do?" You know, in a complex world, you can't always find directly in the Bible an example of Jesus doing kind of Jesus in a situation like you are. Like Jesus didn't deal with social media, you know. So for example, but if we want to know what would Jesus do, the answer is always He would act with virtue. So whatever the situation is, whatever virtue is called for, that is the sure way of following Christ, is to live out the virtue. So it's a very tight, kind of growing in the virtues is a perfect fit with your vision of building kind of forming Christ-centered students, people.
Troy, my take on what I heard is very good, but I think what you got to do is take what Dr. Abela's got here and kind of crystallize that, and not so much faith and Jesus in it, okay? In other words, character formation, this is what we're giving. It's not that you're taking it away. And I'll give you an example. I do a lot of work in mental health, and one of the things that we avoided, but I think we ease into it, is we do not talk about faith, but I'm convincing people now that we can talk about faith, but not sort of front center type of thing. It will come, okay? But right. I think that one of the things here, think of talking to your message might be in this area. Keep some of that content, but crystallize it so that, hey, they're just getting a good person, and this is their problem. Then the next step is into, the Catholic or the faith. So that's my thoughts.
Well, the thing to watch for, Andy, though, is the part of the reason I think that maybe some people lost interest in the idea of virtue is, and we haven't talked about this yet, so I'm glad you brought it up, is virtue without grace ultimately fails.
Exactly.
That just kind of the habits by themselves, we can't get there. Like through my human effort alone, I cannot become a truly courageous, just, and wise and self-disciplined person. I need the grace of God to do that. And so somehow you want to kind of communicate that, because again, it's also very optimistic, very encouraging for students to know, if you don't think you can do this, yeah, you're right, you can't. But that's why you need to pray. You need to pray for the grace. You obviously put your best effort. You try to practice these virtues, but then you pray for the grace to so that Christ Himself will give you the power to live these virtues. I think it's the both and is really important. And I mean, you're clearly, obviously, a Catholic institution. You're called John Paul, right? John Paul the
Yep.
Great. Yeah.
Mhm.
John Paul II. Yeah. So
Yep.
so that's kind of, people know what they're getting, right, as they come in. So it's good to explain that you're going to have you need both. You absolutely need both.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the non-Catholic friends that are coming to the school now as well, that are, because we're still something to be discovered, because the new building's not even open yet right now where this.
Yeah.
So, but people are already going, even non-Catholics going to our website, and they're actually reading our vision, mission, and they're going like, well, you know what? This sounds like a school that's grounded with this, it's grounded in faith, but with this moral compass that our public system is so lacking right now, because it's anything goes. It's if it feels good, do it.
Yeah.
If you think you are something that you're not, well, you are, and you can be whatever you want, if that's the way you feel, rather than it being grounded in truth, and having a truth-based foundation, which is just not happening. So people are seeking that now, and I think it's beautiful that people are coming back to the church and realizing it's like, you know what, these virtues, these truths they come from somewhere. They're not they're not just something we just make up as we go.
Right. Right.
And you can't just be changing these truths, because there's only the truth. There's not your truth and my truth. There is only the truth. And so people are realizing that now, and I think they're finding that out in a lot of ways. Even in how societies run. Capitalism versus socialism. There's a fun topic for you. And how do the virtues fit in to capitalism versus socialism? What do you have any feedback on that?
Sure. I would say, do you have an hour?
Yeah.
No, I try to be quick. Andy knows I've given speeches on this topic as well.
Absolutely, he's the best.
Love it.
Thank you. So the church is very nuanced, but in a clear way on this. That socialism is not compatible with our Catholic faith. I think it was Pope Pius XI who wrote, "No one can be at the same time a sincere Catholic and a socialist." Because socialism is largely an atheistic doctrine, but also it doesn't respect individuality. It doesn't expect our individual conscience, it tries to get people to kind of treat people as a mass, and doesn't trust our individual responsibility. But then the church is quite, I say, nuanced on capitalism. John Paul II himself, in his encyclical Socialism says, well, does the church approve of capitalism? He says it depends what you mean by capitalism. And then he makes a distinction between what today we would call crony capitalism on the one hand, which is all about favors and preferences and so on, and that the church is not in favor of that. And then what I call entrepreneurial capitalism, which is basically where you have individual initiative, companies growing and successful because they serve their customers well. Clearly, the church is very much in favor of that. And so how virtue fits in with that is the ideal economic system is one where we get to exercise the virtues in the service of others. Right? So the purpose of a business is to serve other people and to do so profitably. And the best way to do that is for the managers, the employees, to live the virtues, right? Because they we get even more explicit. I mentioned before, so if we take the 4 cardinal virtues, I mentioned courage is what's going to drive innovation. Justice is what drives strong customer and employee relationships, right? Because that's at the basis of all good relationships. Practical wisdom is what, or again, the habit of making wise decisions is what drives all good strategic and tactical thinking in a business. And then self-discipline is what drives all execution, right? If you're not disciplined, you're not going to execute well. So if you have strategy, execution, innovation, relationships, those are at the heart of a business. And those are the four cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance. So it really does fit very, very, very well.
That's amazing. All right. You got 5 minutes, Andy?
Yeah.
That's great. You know what? There's so many topics that we can dive into, and we can go on and on. But I think it's a good time that we can wrap some things up here as well. Dr. Abela, your book is available where?
So you can get it from the publisher, Sophia Press.
Okay.
And you can get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever good books are sold. Yeah.
All right. That's fantastic, because we want to promote it. We want to promote it within our school. I'm sure we'll be reaching out to you further down the road. And you'll probably get tired of hearing from us, but I'm so enamored with what you're doing there at the Bush School of Business. That's incredible. I'm so excited to hear how that's being implemented in your school, in the teachings there. That is so encouraging, and I truly hope that we can implement more of that at St. John Paul II Academy as well, and be a true leader in education here in British Columbia. So thank you very much for joining us here today. And Andy Szocs, as always, like I said, one of my favorite people. I so enjoy your company, Andy, and everything that you're doing. You're a true leader in our community and in our school as well. You're doing so much. You're inspiring so many of us as well to give more and to help our school grow in virtue. And I thank you, like I said, both for being here and taking the time with us today. So hopefully we can have you back sometime again soon.
Always a pleasure to hang out with Andy.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, everybody, enjoy the day. Thanks for being with us on Catholic Education Matters.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Catholic Education Matters. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the podcast on your favorite listening platform, rate it, and also leave a review. Don't forget to share this episode with your friends and family to help spread the word about the impact of Catholic education. Be sure to listen again.